I was raised in what most would call an academically focused household in the suburbs of Boston. Two high-achieving parents, a younger sister, and a modest colonial-style home with well-kept gardens. We appeared to be the picture-perfect family. My father, Michael, was a mid-level IT manager who prided himself on his stable career, while my mother, Jennifer, a former teacher turned stay-at-home mom, managed our daily lives with meticulous attention to detail. To outsiders, we seemed like the model American family. But anyone close to us would tell you there was always an underlying tension between my parents and me. The reason was painfully simple. They adored my younger sister, Ashley, and I was perpetually the afterthought. This dynamic wasn't always the case, though. During our early years, my parents showed equal love and support to both Ashley and me. Those memories are still vivid. The way they'd beam with pride when either of us achieved something. How they'd comfort us equally when we were down. We were both bright kids, excelling in our own ways, and our parents celebrated every success, big or small. I can still remember the golden period when nothing seemed to create division between us. Piano lessons, science fairs, soccer practice. Our parents attended everything, showing genuine enthusiasm for both their daughters' activities. Back then, there was no subtle preference, no underlying current of favoritism. We were just two sisters, equally loved and supported. But everything changed when I entered middle school and discovered my passion for science. It wasn't even anything dramatic, just a simple science fair project about cancer cells that sparked my interest in medical research. I remember spending countless hours in the school lab, fascinated by the microscope slides and cellular structures. My teacher noticed my enthusiasm and encouraged me to pursue it further. But when I brought home my project, expecting the usual excitement from my parents, something had shifted. While they nodded and smiled, their reaction felt hollow, especially compared to their effusive praise when Ashley won first place in her dance recital the same week. "That's interesting, Sarah," my mother had said, her eyes barely skimming over my carefully prepared presentation. "But don't you think you should focus more on practical subjects? Ashley's activities look so good on college applications." That was the first time I felt it. The subtle sting of being measured against my sister and coming up short. It wasn't just about the science fair. It became a pattern that would shape our family dynamic for years to come. Growing distance. From that point on, every mistake I made, no matter how minor, became a mark against me. If I scored anything less than perfect on a biology test, it was a crisis requiring a family meeting. Meanwhile, if Ashley struggled with her marketing courses, my father would simply say, "She's just finding her groove." That phrase about finding her groove became a running excuse, while I was constantly asked, "Why can't you be more well-rounded like Ashley?" That comparison haunted me through my high school years and into college. As we grew older, Ashley blossomed into everything my parents had envisioned in a daughter. She was popular, outgoing, and had a knack for social media marketing that my parents considered practical. She became the marketing club president, built a significant Instagram following, and seemed to navigate the social world effortlessly. I, on the other hand, became more focused on my research. I spent my free time volunteering at the Children's Hospital, studying medical journals, and working on research projects. I was excelling in my own way, publishing my first research paper as an undergraduate, but it was never enough to compete with Ashley's more visible achievements. By the time we were both in college, the disparity in how we were treated had become impossible to ignore. Ashley got a new car for her internship at a marketing firm, while I took the bus to my research lab. When she needed help with her presentations, our parents would spend hours helping her perfect every slide. If I asked for help understanding a complex grant application, they'd brush me off, telling me I should be independent since I was pursuing such an advanced path. It was clear they viewed Ashley as the daughter who needed nurturing, while I was expected to figure everything out on my own. Career paths diverge. Despite this imbalance, I tried to maintain a relationship with Ashley. After all, she was my sister, and beneath all the favoritism, I still cared about her. But it became increasingly difficult to ignore her growing sense of entitlement. She seemed to revel in her status as the golden child, knowing she could get away with almost anything. It wasn't just our parents who were captivated by her carefully curated image. Professors, colleagues, even my own friends would often get drawn into her sphere of influence. She was the social media darling with the perfect feed, and I was the serious researcher, always in the background of family photos. I began to wonder if anyone really saw me for who I was, a dedicated researcher working on potentially life-saving studies, or if I would always be just Ashley's sister, the one who chose the difficult path. The breaking point. The turning point came during my second year in the PhD program. I had been making significant progress in my pediatric cancer research, earning recognition from my peers, and securing partial funding through prestigious grants. Between lab work and my hospital volunteer hours, I was finally starting to feel like I was making a real difference. I thought maybe, with these achievements, my relationship with my parents would improve, that they would finally see the value in my chosen path. I was wrong. Around this time, Ashley started dating Brandon, a charismatic medical equipment sales representative who frequented our research facility. He came from a wealthy family and had the kind of polished corporate image my parents adored. They practically adopted him from day one, treating him like the son they never had. Every weekend, they would host elaborate dinners at their house, where Brandon would charm everyone with stories about his latest sales victories. My parents were already envisioning a future where Ashley and Brandon would become a power couple in the medical industry, giving them the perfect corporate successors they'd always wanted. Meanwhile, I was struggling to balance my research commitments with the demands of my doctoral program. The grant money barely covered my basic needs, and I was working extra hours in the lab to maintain my research momentum. When I'd come home for occasional family dinners, exhausted from 14-hour days at the lab, all I'd hear about was Ashley and Brandon's latest business venture, or how Ashley's social media following had grown. No one asked about my research breakthroughs or how I was managing the pressures of academia. "Why can't you network like Brandon?" my mother would say during these dinners, completely missing the point of my research work. "He understands how to make connections in the medical field." Then came the incident that would shatter what remained of our family dynamic. The betrayal. It was during a crucial phase of my research. I had been working on a promising new approach to treating aggressive childhood leukemia, and preliminary results were showing significant potential. I had shared some of my findings with Ashley during a rare moment of sisterly bonding, explaining my excitement about the possibility of helping young patients. She had seemed genuinely interested, asking questions and taking notes, which I naively interpreted as her finally taking an interest in my work. A week later, I discovered that Ashley had used my research data and preliminary findings in a major marketing presentation for her company, which was trying to secure contracts with pharmaceutical firms. She had presented my work as market research, completely misrepresenting the scientific implications and ethical considerations of my study. When I confronted her about it, she dismissed my concerns. "It's just a presentation, Sarah," she said with that familiar condescending smile. "Besides, I made your work actually useful for once." The confrontation. I was furious. This wasn't just about unauthorized use of data. This was my life's work, my contribution to pediatric cancer research being reduced to a marketing pitch. The implications were serious. My research grant was under review, and unauthorized disclosure of preliminary findings could jeopardize everything I'd worked for. When I tried to explain this to my parents, their response left me stunned. Instead of understanding the gravity of the situation, they sided with Ashley completely. My father's words cut deep. "You're being melodramatic, Sarah," he said, his voice dripping with dismissal. "Ashley's helping your research reach a wider audience. We always knew you were jealous of her business acumen, but this is taking it too far." My mother chimed in, "Honey, Ashley's presentation could lead to actual funding for research like yours. Isn't that what you want?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had completely missed the point about research ethics, confidentiality, and professional integrity. It was as if all my years of dedication to medical research meant nothing compared to Ashley's marketing goals. The ultimatum. The situation quickly escalated into a full-blown family crisis. My research supervisor had noticed the unauthorized use of our data and called for an emergency meeting. My parents' solution. They wanted me to sign a document stating I had willingly shared the information with Ashley's company, effectively covering up her ethical breach. "Just sign it, Sarah," my mother pleaded. "Family comes first. Think about Ashley's career." When I refused, my father gave me an ultimatum: either sign the document or don't consider myself part of the family anymore. The choice was clear to me, though it broke my heart. I couldn't compromise my professional integrity and the potential impact on pediatric cancer research, even for family. So I left. I packed my essential research materials, some clothes, and walked out of their house that evening. I found temporary housing near the research facility and threw myself completely into my work. That was the last time I spoke to my parents or Ashley for 5 years. The aftermath. In the years that followed, I struggled to rebuild my life without my family's support. The Research Ethics Committee had launched an investigation, and though I was eventually cleared of any wrongdoing, the process was emotionally draining. I had to juggle my doctoral studies with increased lab hours, barely making ends meet on my research stipend. There were nights when I'd stay in the lab until dawn, not just because of the work, but because I couldn't afford better housing near the facility. But I persevered. I focused on what mattered: my research and the children whose lives it could potentially save. I completed my PhD, published several significant papers, and secured a prestigious research position. The pediatric cancer treatment protocol I had been working on showed promising results in initial trials. Meanwhile, through mutual colleagues, I heard that Ashley's career was flourishing in her own way. She had leveraged her marketing skills and Brandon's connections to land a senior position at a major pharmaceutical marketing firm, a position my father had helped her secure through his industry contacts. They seemed to be living the perfect corporate success story, minus one estranged sister. An unexpected invitation. 5 years passed before I heard from my family again. During that time, I managed to establish myself in the medical research community, earning respect for my work in pediatric oncology. The only person who had maintained any contact with me was my grandmother, Eleanor, a retired professor of biochemistry. She would occasionally send me thoughtful emails about recent developments in cancer research or check in on my well-being, but she never pushed me about reconciling with the family. Then, out of the blue, I received an invitation to my grandmother's Christmas dinner. The email was simple but carried the weight of her academic precision. "Your presence would be valuable at this gathering. There are matters of both personal and professional significance to discuss." I hesitated. The thought of facing my family again made my stomach churn, but something in my grandmother's carefully worded message told me this was important. Besides, Eleanor had always been different from the rest of the family. She understood the value of research and ethical integrity in a way my parents never had. The family gathering. Walking into my grandmother's house felt like stepping into a time capsule of unresolved emotions. My parents, Ashley, and Brandon were all there, along with various relatives who had been absent from my life for the past 5 years. The tension in the room was palpable. My parents greeted me with stiff formality, while Ashley maintained a practiced smile, acting as if our last interaction hadn't involved her compromising my research integrity. Brandon looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot while clutching his designer briefcase like a shield. The evening progressed with the kind of forced politeness that only deeply fractured families can manage. Everyone seemed to be walking on eggshells, carefully avoiding any mention of research, ethics, or career developments. That is, until my grandmother started distributing what she called legacy items. I wasn't expecting anything significant. My presence alone felt like an intrusion into their carefully maintained family narrative. But when I opened the box my grandmother handed me, my heart nearly stopped. Inside was her precious research archive, decades of groundbreaking work in biochemistry, along with legal documents naming me as the executor of her entire estate. This wasn't just any inheritance, it represented her life's work and her considerable assets, including her fully equipped private research facility. The implications were clear to everyone in the room. Grandmother Eleanor hadn't just chosen me as her heir, she had chosen to entrust her scientific legacy to someone she believed would honor it. I could see my parents' faces drain of color as they realized what this meant. Ashley, who had always been the golden child, sat there in stunned silence, her carefully crafted social media persona offering no guidance for this situation. The aftermath. The rest of the evening descended into barely contained chaos. My parents quickly shifted into damage control mode, their faces fixed with forced smiles that couldn't hide their shock. They pulled me aside into my grandmother's study, suddenly eager to discuss family unity and shared opportunities. "Sarah, sweetheart," my mother began, her voice honey-sweet in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in years. "We've been thinking a lot about what happened, and we realize we may have been hasty in our judgments." My father chimed in, "Your sister's getting married soon, and this would be the perfect time to heal old wounds. Family should stick together, especially when it comes to managing significant resources." The confrontation escalates. After the Christmas dinner fiasco, I retreated to my apartment near the research facility, my mind reeling from the evening's events. But the peace I sought was short-lived. The messages started flooding in, not just from my parents and Ashley, but from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Each one seemed to be reading from the same script. Family is everything. Research facilities should benefit everyone. And the most ironic, think about the greater good. None of these suddenly concerned relatives had been around when I was struggling to clear my name after the research ethics investigation. They hadn't offered support when I was working double shifts at the lab to keep my studies going. They certainly hadn't spoken up when Ashley used my research without permission, nearly derailing my entire career. The unexpected visit. Then came the breaking point. One afternoon, while I was reviewing patient data in my home office, my parents and Ashley showed up unannounced at my apartment. They didn't just knock, they practically pounded on the door, causing my research assistant, who was staying with me to help with a critical study phase, to jump in alarm. "Sarah, we know you're in there." My mother's voice carried through the door, thick with tears. "We need to talk about the research facility." When I opened the door, they pushed their way in, my mother already in full dramatic mode, my father looking stern, and Ashley hanging back with what I recognized as her concerned sister expression, the same one she used in her social media posts about family bonds. "We can forgive everything that happened before," my father announced, as if he were offering me a tremendous gift. "The research ethics issue, your absence from family events, all of it. We just need to discuss how to manage grandmother's facility as a family." Ashley stepped forward, her voice practiced and smooth. "Think about the marketing potential, Sarah. With my connections and your technical knowledge, we could make it something really special." The final stand. I stood there in my own living room, surrounded by research papers and grant proposals, watching my family try to negotiate their way into my grandmother's legacy. The irony was almost too much to bear. After years of dismissing my work as too academic, too impractical, they were suddenly very interested in being part of it, now that it came with substantial resources. The truth emerges. Just when the situation in my apartment seemed about to spiral out of control, my phone buzzed with a message from grandmother Eleanor. She had heard about my family's unannounced visit through her network of academic colleagues in the building. Without my asking, she had decided to address the situation in her characteristically methodical way. She had called an emergency meeting with several key family members, including my aunts and uncles, to reveal some uncomfortable truths. During this meeting, she exposed the full extent of my parents' and Ashley's deceptions. They had been telling the family a completely fabricated version of events about the research ethics incident, claiming that I had willingly shared my data with Ashley's company and then tried to retract it out of professional jealousy. When my grandmother presented the actual documentation from the Ethics Committee investigation, including emails showing Ashley's unauthorized use of my research data, the family was stunned. She also revealed something I hadn't known. Ashley's company had tried to patent certain aspects of my research methodology without credit, an attempt that was only stopped by the vigilance of my research institution's legal team. The unraveling. As these revelations spread through the family network, more truths began to surface. My uncle revealed that my father had taken out a second mortgage on their house to fund Ashley's elaborate marketing campaigns and social media presence. A cousin who worked in pharmaceutical sales disclosed that Brandon had ended their relationship after realizing that the promised family connections in the medical research field weren't as solid as Ashley had claimed. The most revealing information came from my grandmother herself. She explained why she had chosen me as her successor. Sarah's dedication to pediatric cancer research, even in the face of family opposition and financial hardship, showed me where the true future of our family's contribution to science lies. This isn't about favorites. It's about ensuring that decades of medical research continues in capable, ethical hands. The resolution. The family members who had once been quick to judge me based on my parents' narrative began reaching out with apologies. But these felt hollow to me now. I couldn't help but wonder, if they had so easily believed the worst about me before, what would stop them from doing it again? My parents made one final attempt to reach out. Their tone notably different, less demanding, more apologetic. But I could still sense their underlying focus on the research facility and its potential, rather than any genuine desire to repair our relationship. For now, I've chosen to focus on what truly matters: my research and the children whose lives it might help. The facility my grandmother entrusted to me isn't just a building or an asset, it's a responsibility to continue important medical research with integrity and purpose. That's a legacy I intend to honor, with or without my family's approval. Epilogue. As I write this from my new office in the research facility, I can't help but feel a mix of emotions. The path that led me here wasn't what I would have chosen, but it's taught me valuable lessons about integrity, perseverance, and staying true to one's principles. The pediatric cancer research continues, and with grandmother Eleanor's support, we're making progress that could help countless children. Sometimes the family you choose, in my case, my research team, and the children we help, becomes more important than the family you're born into.